Everyone, I'm Mike Kasmer. We're here in beautiful, sunny for now, Mont Saint Anne, Canada for the last round of the DH World Cup and the Cross Country World Cup. I'm gonna go take a walk around the pits and talk with some of the team mechanics and see what tech might have made a difference this year. We saw all sorts of companies experimenting with different frame stiffness. We saw the shake weight or tuned mass damper, as you might call it, basically a spring in a can and a weight that's designed to keep the bike planted on the ground. We've also seen devices designed to mitigate pedal feedback. So I wanna go have a chat and see what they think might have actually made a difference in the race results and what we might see in the future. All right, I'm here with Jordy from Fox, and we're going to ask him some questions about the tech that may or may not have made a difference during this year's race season. Jordy, what do you think? We saw a lot of tinkering. We saw people with O-chains and magical hubs and electronic suspension, different tires. Is there anything you think made an actual big difference on the bikes this year?
Big difference. No, probably not. I think I'm a huge fan of the O-chains. I ride them on almost everything, so I think those add a functional difference to most bikes. I think, honestly, our new Grip X2 dampers made things a lot easier for us as well as far as tunability. But I think that the biggest change is that people are learning how bikes function, so that maybe some of these kooky ideas that you've seen in the past are simmering down a little bit, and there's a bit more function involved in some of the choices people are making.
Yeah, that makes sense. Do you think some of that is like the increase in data acquisition or just in general more knowledge?
I think it's in general more knowledge. The deeper I dive into data, especially at events, the worse it seems to get. I think what is happening is that riders are learning a bit more and mechanics are learning a bit more, and that gap of mystery versus actuality is narrowing down a little bit.
That makes sense. And then going into the off season, or anything you think riders are going to be really focused on? Is there one thing that stood out that you think everyone's going to try to get some new tires or some new hubs from somebody? Is there any one thing that all the riders seem to be like, I need to try that?
I think one of the hot topics now is mass dampers, and everybody's scrambling to figure out how they work and how you use them.
Yep.
So that's probably going to be a big off-season topic.
Shake weights for everybody.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Front and rear, left and right, like pedals, wherever.
Yeah, makes sense.
Soles of your shoes.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Cool. Yeah, well, that's it. We're going to keep and see what else everyone else has to say, but makes sense.
Cool.
Thanks for chatting.
Thank you.
I'm here with Brett at Norco. He's Great Seas mechanic. Is that correct? Yeah. And so we're just going to chat a little bit about the tech that may or may not have made a difference during the race season this year. So Brett, what have you seen that riders are really clamoring for, or is there any particular tech you think made a difference? We've seen a lot of people doing O-chains or even high pivots or frame stiffness. Is there one thing in particular that you think might have made a difference during the racing this year?
Yeah. Bike industry changes so quickly, and obviously things change every year. It's been a weird couple of years, but we're starting to see changes again. I think riders are really just looking for a bike that's super capable of just flying through, but is still playful. You're still able to move it around. You're still able to get those nuances, changing line position and knowing confidently you're going to hit a section and the bike's not going to do anything weird. With our bike, obviously we've spoken about it a lot throughout the year, it's very adjustable without adjusting something else. That really just helps us understand when a rider's feeling something, where it's coming from. And I think at this level, it's important to have that real dialed in feel and not change something that then changes something else and then you're chasing.
Right, just kind of like a level of customization per the rider, because some riders might want one little geometry thing, someone wants something else.
Like Gracie's style is so different to what Greg's style is, what Kirk's style is, and they've all got their slight differences as well as just bike size. But yeah.
So is there anything that going into the off season that riders are especially interested in? Like we've seen a lot of tuned mass dampers and things like that. So are people asking like, hey, I want to try this as soon as race season's over?
Yeah, good question. I think with this bike, they're working directly with the engineers. The engineers have an idea, and they've slowly been just taking points throughout the whole year of what to do. So for this bike, it's so different to what they were doing previously. It's really just honing in this bike.
Right.
Yeah, they're not trying to think too far outside of the box at this stage.
And one of the engineers races this bike too, right? So it probably helps.
Yeah, that's a good insight.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
All right, thanks. All right, I'm here with Pivot, and this is Barney. We've got fresh bike right here. We're going to talk about the bike a little bit, but first we're going to start with overall season and the tech that riders were using and what you think might have made a difference. We saw a lot of people using O-chains or high pivots or frame stiffness, that kind of stuff. Is there anything in general you think stood out as actually making a difference in the race results?
It's hard to say with race results, but I think one of the things definitely in the last even last kind of quarter of the season that everyone's starting to do is the mass tune damper. You're starting to see a lot of them crop up out of nowhere, which is pretty interesting. So people are trying them all over the bike. Some on the rear axle, some kind of down by the bottom bracket, up by the fork. We've tried it in a few places now as well, and that definitely seems to really have a massive effect on how the bike feels and tracks and kind of the stability of the bike. I mean, the obvious one that people have been doing for years now is the weight on the bottom bracket as well, bit of stability. But I'd say, yeah, like weight is a massive thing that people are trying to mess around with and figure out where they want it on the bike. And yeah, to have this new bike, which is really light, it means you have a lot of room to play around with where you want to put the weight as well. So
Right. Yeah, it's easier to start with a light bike and make it heavier than make the heavy bike light.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So is that kind of like on the off season, you guys going to be going further with weight testing, basically?
Yeah. I think we'll definitely mess around with it a bit more for sure. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, well, I guess we got the new bike here. We might as well talk a little bit about it. When we saw the lugged, I guess that's another thing. We've seen more companies using kind of the lugged construction on their prototypes and then switching to carbon for production typically. Does that make it easier to just kind of like you get the bike adjusted and it's locked in and now you have...
Yeah, so the lugged prototyping is definitely, it makes life a lot quicker and easier if you need to change things or, like if you want to change geometries and stuff, it's way quicker to make a lugged bike. It's quite expensive, but it's a quick way of doing things. And then it's also a more realistic feel of how the bike is going to be because you can still tune all the carbon between the lugs and get the flex to how you want it to be as well. So it's a more realistic view of what the final production carbon mold will be like.
Right. Totally. That makes sense. So yeah, I guess that's race tech that the racers might not have control of, but I think it is something. It's interesting to see that more and more companies are kind of using that as development.
Yeah,
so awesome. Well, excited to see how these bikes go this weekend.
Yeah,
and
me too.
Yeah, thanks for chatting.
No, thank you very much.
All right, I'm here with Maxime in the Commencel Muck-Off pits. Chat about some of the bikes technology that they've been using this year on the circuit. So Maxime, we've seen a lot of teams experimenting with frame stiffness. Lots of people running O chains. We've seen people using the tune mass dampers. Is there any one thing this year that the team has found has been particularly useful to increase the speed or comfort of the rider?
I guess we were the first one to implement like a stiffness adjustment on a frame, like like bolt-on ready for everyone to play with. So yeah, like for sure, definitely it's something you play with. It's super important, like different tracks, different like behavior that you want on the bike. So for sure, it's a big things like this year.
Yeah. So you're trying to find just that mix of trying to find traction, but also enough stiffness so that it doesn't feel like it's a noodle.
Yeah, like as much as like a forgiveness and like stability at the same time. So which is like a bit of compromise between both worlds. But like this for sure it's helping.
Yeah. And have you guys experimented with the tune mass dampers we're starting to see other companies try to use?
We have some device that sometimes we race. We race at Downhill, for example, with them, and depending on the track and the adjustment of the suspension you have and all the frames, that can be like really helpful also.
And so now going into the off season, is there anything in particular that riders have been saying, I want to try this once the race season's over? Is there anything that they're like, I need to try this, but I can't do it right now?
The most thing they want every time to increase is like it's being less in a compromise. So they want like if for example we said okay, I have the maximum forgiveness and at the same time the maximum like rigidity and like and performance and dynamic. They want like to reduce this gap at the maximums to have like just the perfect bike. So every time we try to like reduce the compromise.
Easy, just make the perfect bike and then you're set.
Easy,
no big deal.
easy.
I'm here with Pablo, Mondraker's race engineer. So I'm going to ask a couple questions about how the season went and the technology that really you think might have affected the race results. So is there anything in particular this year that made a difference? You think we've seen people experimenting with frame stiffness. We've seen those tune mass dampers. We've seen things like O-chain or different hubs. Is there anything that you guys have been using that you think was especially important?
Basically, yes. I mean, at the beginning of the season, we work a lot with the stiffness of the bike. It's something we work in pre-season. Then during the season has been, let's say, fixed some small details, but the big things were already done, and was, let's say, a big change of what we were using in previous bikes, let's say. And then during the season, as you know, we introduced the mass damper in Andorra. We have been using that and working. Still is in the first part of his life. I think there is a lot of margin there to work, so we are learning a lot about that. And yeah, also we have been using the E13 hubs that they were released some days ago. we really think it's a big improvement for how the bike behaves. And yeah, super happy with that. Where we have been working with them during the season, some evolution on those hubs, and now they work really, really good.
Cool. Is there one thing that you think riders are trying to achieve? Like, do riders want their bikes to just be super calm? Or are they, like pretty flexible? Is there one thing that like every rider says, I want it to be like this?
I think they want a bike that feels stable and that they feel like they have margin to push more, like to be able to push to the limit. So I don't really think they expect a feeling. They just want to be able to, like I say, to feel that they can push a little bit more during the weekend from when the runs start to go on. Yeah, that's it. Like I say, our bike is much softer than our previous bikes, and what we have seen is that is improving every time.
So going into the off season, is there anything that you think you'll be experimenting more with? You mentioned those tuned mass dampers. Is that going to be kind of the focus?
I mean, yeah, for sure that we have a lot to investigate, to work on data. That sometimes during the weekend racing is difficult. Is better to do it in testing. But yeah, basically that is one of the priorities. Obviously, we will work together with Fox, with the suspension. That again, when the riders are happy with the setup, it's difficult to investigate more, like to change something. But the winter is the time to do it. And obviously, with the bike, we have some parts ready to change. That yeah, we will investigate as soon as possible.
Perfect. Sounds good. Well, have a good off season. Excited to see what happens. All right. I'm here with Joe in the Trek factory pits. Chat about the technology that might or might not have made a difference this year. So what have you seen this year? We've seen a lot of people using O chains and frame stiffness and the tuned mass dampers. Is there any one of those things or something else that you think made a difference?
Probably the overall combination of everything. Like O chains have become more and more of a staple sort of thing. So pretty much every team is running them now, regardless of what suspension platform they're on, whether it's high pivot or sort of normal standard sort of pivot height on there. And I guess the one this year is mass dampers. Mm-hmm. It's there's always something each year, and that seems to be the standout one.
Yeah,
like it's the next thing for people to jump on and experiment with. Like some teams have gone further with it than others. And some riders are fully committed to using it every run, every practice run, every race run, whereas others have dabbled here and there and haven't quite decided yet. But I think that's going to be, it's new to the game, but we'll see how that develops over time. And yeah, it's pretty raw at the moment, I'd say, with it, but it could be a permanent feature.
Yeah, I mean, you guys had it pretty early, I'd say, compared to it's kind of hidden behind the race plate on some races. I think we might not even noticed it.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we were pretty sneaky with it, so we might show up the eyes of photographers and everything for quite a while. Yeah, it's been using it for quite a while, and yeah, with our riders, it's at the moment we are some tracks yes, some tracks no, depending on conditions as well. So yeah, it's
this weekend. Will it be on Mont Saint Anne?
We'll see. I think some riders are going to start with it and see how we go, depending on how wet or dry it ends up being.
Yeah. Which would determine, like, is dry better for it or wet better for it?
I'd probably say dry is better for it because you're getting more feedback through the frame and everything rather than being on soft ground. But then again, it is quite rocky here in places, so it maybe may show a difference there. But we'll see. We'll see. Yeah.
Nice. So going into the off season, would you say that's kind of like the top priority is experiment with that, or is there another aspect you'll be kind of digging into?
I'd say I wouldn't say it's a top priority because I think there's always more to be done with suspension platforms and geometry and everything, and as I said, frame stiffness. But that could be the icing on the cake once you've figured everything else out.
Right. You kind of integrate that into a new frame and you get the whole package. We're here at Yeti with their not yet released downhill bike. Hopefully someday. I hope it comes out. But in any case, they've been developing it. So right now we're talking about things that you've seen this year that riders and teams are trying to use to improve a bike's performance. We've seen things like O-chain, tuned mass dampers, frame stiffness. Is there anything you guys have been working on to kind of optimize the bike for the riders?
It's something that I think Richie's pretty interested in, is trying a lot of those things. He's been running on his enduro bike, running a steering damper all year from Paddy Mullen, which has been a pretty decent improvement. But yeah, the mass dampers and stuff like that, it's something that's probably got a lot of merit in trying. Because I mean, it makes sense. It's trying to just quieten down the trail of the bike's noise and everything anyway. So Richie's pretty into just trying everything on the bike to see more just to see what's going to happen, not exactly if that's actually what he's feeling, but just to see if there's any difference. So I think it's pretty good. Yeah, and like even on the enduro side, we had the live valve neo shock, which I think made a fairly big difference, and we're hoping to eventually get something like that on one of these big rigs to see if there's like set sections of the track where you just lock her out.
Yeah, makes sense.
Like tune the damping or something like that. So yeah.
And for the mass damper, you guys using the countercycle one? Is that what you've been experimenting with, or are you?
Yeah, that's that guy sort of approached us at Ludenville and had a bit of a chat, and I think he's going to be here too. So yeah, that was one actually US Open last week. Ran it on the big bike for the first time. And I think we've got to do some tuning with having both of them on front and rear, and just playing around with where it sits. But I think, yeah, from what Richie said, there was probably a fair bit of benefit on just, as I said, quietening down the front end.
Right.
And it sort of works hand in hand with the damping that the Foxfall gives us. So.
Yeah. Going into the off season, are there any particular projects that you're kind of like something to experiment with that, or any other experiments that you're planning on doing?
I'm hoping to send Richie home with all the gadgets, and he can play with them as he sees, and then I'll try and get over at some point to the US at some point to have a bit of a test session with him as well. But yeah, there's always, off season is always a great time for us just to try all the new things that have popped up during the season and see what works and see what doesn't. So kind of throw everything at them and see what sticks.
Awesome. Thank you.